All right, so today we're going like really deep on something pretty disturbing that's been, kind of bubbling up online.
Yeah,
It's all this stuff about what they're calling comm networks and how they're, linked to some really bad stuff happening in the real world.
absolutely. And it's
I think our listeners are here because they want to get a good grasp on this without, getting lost in the weeds.
right.
And we want to give them just the most important stuff.
Yeah. And we've been digging into a ton of recent reports to do just that, really pulling out the key takeaways.
Oh, yeah, and we're relying on some solid information here, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The National Crime Agency,
Yeah.
the NCA, their report's been really helpful.
Right, the NCA.
Among others.
Yeah, and I think just to give everyone a sense of just how fast this thing is growing,
Yeah.
the reports out of the UK are showing like a six-fold increase in these comm networks just between 2022 and 2024.
Yeah, that's a huge jump and really kind of shows, that we're dealing with a pretty serious and urgent threat.
6 times in 2 years. That's definitely something to pay attention to.
For sure.
So let's get into it. What exactly are we talking about when we say comm network? It's kind of a vague term.
Yeah, it is a bit.
Yeah.
But you can think of them as like online communities where people are, working together, sometimes even competing to cause harm, both
Are
online.
you actually competing?
Yeah, like who could do the most damage kind of thing.
Wow.
It's like a really dangerous form of online, collaboration focused on just inflicting damage.
So when we say harm, what are we talking about? I mean, is this just like online harassment or is this something more serious?
No, it goes way beyond like just trolling or, online bullying.
Okay.
The NCA reports link these groups to a whole bunch of really harmful activities.
Like what?
So you got things like cyber attacks, using malware, malicious software,
Right.
ransomware that locks up computer systems and demands payment,
Yeah.
data breaches,
Yeah.
different kinds of fraud,
Okay.
but it gets much worse. Yeah, it extends to stuff like extremism,
Oh, wow.
grooming and blackmailing people,
Mm-hmm.
serious violence, and even child sexual abuse.
That is a really disturbing list.
Yeah, it really is.
So, and you said these aren't like hidden away in some dark corner of the internet.
Right.
These are out in the open.
Yeah, exactly. That's a key thing to remember. They're not operating in the shadows.
Okay.
The NCA specifically says they exist on these everyday platforms that tons of young people use.
Wow.
And that easy access, that's
Yeah.
a big reason why there's such a huge and growing problem.
So just to reiterate, we said a six-fold increase in reported networks in just 2 years.
Yeah,
It's really alarming.
it really shows how fast this is escalating.
It does.
And to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about,
Yeah.
NCA analysts estimate there are millions of messages being shared within these networks.
Millions.
In the UK and other Western countries relating to sexual and physical abuse.
That's a staggering number.
It's hard to even comprehend that much harmful content being passed around.
Millions of messages. Yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around that.
Yeah.
So who are these people in these comm networks? Like, what do we know about who's participating in this?
Well, the reports show a pretty clear trend.
Okay.
The main group involved is teenage boys,
Teenage boys.
which is really interesting and raises a lot of questions about, why this specific age group is so drawn to this.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, that's something researchers are still trying to figure out, but it's a
Okay.
crucial piece of the puzzle.
It is for sure.
So,
What kind of stuff are they actually sharing in these groups? Like, is there a particular type of material that's really common?
yeah, the content they're sharing is often described as, sadistic, meaning they get pleasure from cruelty,
Okay.
misogynistic,
Mm.
hating or being prejudiced against women, and nihilistic, which is basically rejecting all moral principles
Oh, wow.
and believing that life is meaningless.
So it's like deeply disturbing stuff that seems to normalize and even glorify violence and abuse. And what's motivating them to do this? Like, what's driving these young people to engage in such destructive behavior?
Well, it seems like there are a few different things at play.
Okay.
For some, it's about getting attention and status within the group.
Right.
There's this twisted sense of achievement that comes with doing these harmful things and then sharing them within the group for recognition.
Yeah.
We also see a lot of extreme beliefs being used to justify violence.
Okay.
This could be anything from far-right ideologies to like really obscure and disturbing belief systems.
Right.
And then, of course, there's the element of sexual gratification for some people.
Okay.
And for others, it's purely about the money. through criminal activities like fraud. So it's like a whole mix of motivations.
It really is a complex web of factors.
You mentioned coercion and extortion, too.
Yeah.
How do those tactics fit into all of this?
Sadly, they're pretty common in these networks.
Like how so? Well, offenders will often groom their victims.
Yeah.
Slowly building trust and manipulating them into thinking they're in a relationship.
Right.
Or, creating this sense of dependency.
Okay.
And that makes it so hard for victims to see the danger and, reach out for help.
Right. Right. It makes them more vulnerable.
Exactly.
The reports also have some really troubling case studies.
Yeah, they do.
Let's look at those to get a better understanding of the real world impact of this online activity.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
The first case they highlight is this guy, Cameron Finnegan.
Right. Cameron Finnegan. He was 19 years old and got a 9-year extended sentence back in January.
9 years.
Yeah. And his convictions included possessing a terrorist document, indecent images of children, and something really horrific, encouraging someone online to take her own life.
Wow.
Yeah, really disturbing stuff.
So what was his connection to these comm networks?
Well, Finnegan was a member of this extreme satanic group called 764.
764.
And they followed this militant accelerationist ideology.
What does that even mean?
It's basically a far-right belief system that advocates for, violently overthrowing society as we know it.
So really extreme stuff.
Yeah, very much so.
The stuff they found when they arrested him paints a pretty disturbing picture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What did they find?
Well, in his bedroom, they found a tapestry of Baphomet.
Who or what is Baphomet?
It's kind of a complex symbol, but it's often associated with Satanism and the occult.
Okay, so pretty dark stuff.
Yeah.
What else?
They also found a defaced Bible with references to this 764 group.
Okay.
Notebooks full of disturbing images like pentagrams and swastikas, and even red writing that referenced his online alias Acity.
So it seems like he was really deep into this extremist subculture.
It really does, yeah.
And then there are the Telegram chats.
Right.
Those revealed some pretty terrifying intentions.
Absolutely. Like in one exchange, he's actually encouraging this suicidal individual to take her own life.
He's encouraging her.
Yeah. And he even asks her to stream it online so he can share it with the 764 group.
Oh, my God.
And then he brags about it in his private chats.
That's awful.
Yeah. And that's not all. He was also found with an 11-page document that outlined ways to carry out truck attacks.
Truck attacks, like driving into crowds.
Exactly. Essentially a guide on how to cause mass casualties.
Oh, God.
And then there was that unsettling thing with the homeless person.
Right. What was that all about?
Well, Finnegan posted this photo online of a red tent.
Okay.
With these messages that suggested he wanted to kill a homeless person.
He said that online.
Yeah. And then later, a tent matching that description was found with graffiti linked to the 764 group.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't just online talk.
Right. And while Finnegan later said his online statements were just fantasy.
It's just fantasy.
Yeah. But as Deputy Chief Constable Claire Fenley pointed out, his online activities clearly had real-world and potentially deadly consequences.
Right, because even if he didn't actually do it himself, he might have inspired someone else to...
Exactly. It's that copycat effect that's really worrying.
Yeah, that's scary.
So yeah, his case was pretty disturbing.
It really was. So let's move on to the second case study, Richard E. Hymier.
Okay, so...
His involvement seems to be more about enabling cybercrime within these networks.
Yeah, that's right. Richard E. Hymier is 21 years old, and he was convicted in February of 2 fraud offenses.
Okay.
And 3 offenses related to possessing and sharing indecent images of children.
So his case is directly linked to his membership in this comm network called CVLT.
Exactly.
How did they find out about his involvement in this CVLT network?
Well, it was actually the online platform Discord, where the CVLT group was operating.
Okay.
They noticed some suspicious activity and reported it.
Good for them.
Yeah, and the investigation that followed found that E. Hymier was using the online name Retaliate #1337.
Retaliate #1337.
Yeah, and he had accessed CVLT-related channels hundreds of times.
Hundreds of times.
Yeah, and in those channels, he was giving out stolen email addresses and passwords. And they believe he was also sharing indecent images of children within those groups.
And the NCA called him a key enabler for this group.
Right.
What did they mean by that?
So Steve Laval from the NCA explained that E. Hymier was providing stolen data that the group could then use to commit fraud against potentially hundreds of victims.
So he was like supplying them with the tools for their crime.
Exactly. And while he might not have been directly involved in every harmful act, his actions enabled a much wider range of criminal activities within the network.
So these two cases really highlight the different ways these comm networks can lead to harm in the real world,
Right.
from directly inciting violence and encouraging suicide to enabling cybercrime on a larger scale.
Yeah, they show the broad spectrum of harm that can come from these groups.
And it's important to remember that these aren't just isolated incidents.
No, definitely not.
The NCA's National Strategic Assessment points to this bigger trend, this increasing exploitation of our online lives, and a growing connection between online radicalization and serious violence and extremism in the real world.
It's like the lines are getting blurred.
Yeah. And the report also mentions some really disturbing instances of coercion of young girls in these online spaces.
Yeah, that's right. The NCA and UK police have found cases where girls as young as 11 have been coerced into self-harm,
Oh, God.
sexually abusing themselves, their siblings, even pets.
That's horrifying.
It is, and tragically, some have even been encouraged to take their own lives.
It's just awful.
Yeah, it really shows how vulnerable young people are in these online networks and how manipulative and predatory these offenders can be.
And it's also really concerning that membership in these communities can be quite fluid,
Right?
and that the individuals involved are often targeting people their own age or even younger.
Yeah, it's not always the classic case of older predators preying on children.
Right.
It's often peer-on-peer abuse and exploitation that's facilitated by these online networks.
Oh. So after all the attention around the Netflix show Adolescence, it seems like there's a growing awareness of these issues.
Yeah, definitely.
And we've seen responses from public figures about toxic influencers.
Right.
But has this increased awareness led to any concrete action or like heightened concern from law enforcement and government agencies?
Oh, absolutely. Alistair Simpson and his assistant chief constable, he stressed how important undercover online officers are.
Undercover officers.
Yeah, in identifying and disrupting these networks.
Makes sense.
And the NCA itself has said they're working with police forces, tech companies, child safeguarding agencies, even psychologists and academic experts.
Wow. So a lot of collaboration going on.
Yeah, they're really trying to get a better understanding of how young people get involved in this type of offending.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and they're also encouraging parents to talk openly and honestly with their kids about their online activities and the potential risks.
That's so important.
It is.
What about the government? What steps are they taking to address this?
Well, Jess Phillips, the Minister for Safeguarding, has said the government is using everything they can to make the UK safer for children online.
Okay.
She specifically highlighted the new Online Safety Act.
Right.
And she's also sent a strong message to tech companies, emphasizing their responsibility to make sure that their platforms are safe for kids.
Yeah, they have a huge responsibility.
They really do.
We've also heard from organizations that work directly with vulnerable people and children.
Right.
What are their thoughts on all of this?
Well, Andy Burrows from the Molly Rose Foundation, he described the risk from these comm networks as deeply disturbing and sharply growing.
Yeah, I can see why he'd say that.
Yeah. And he's also raised concerns about how effective Ofcom's response has been.
Okay, so there's still work to be done.
Definitely. But it's important to remember that there is support out there for people who have been affected by this.
Right.
The NSPCC has helplines for both children and concerned adults.
That's good to know.
Yeah, and the National Association for People Abused in Childhood offers support for adult survivors.
So there are resources available.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this has been a really important and honestly pretty disturbing deep dive into the world of comm networks.
Yeah, it's not an easy topic.
No, it's not, but I think it's vital that we talk about it.
I agree.
So just to recap, we've seen this huge and rapid increase in these online communities.
Right.
The incredibly dangerous activities they're involved in.
Yeah.
The alarmingly young age of many of the people participating.
Yeah, that's a big concern.
And the very real potential for serious consequences offline.
It's all connected.
And we've also touched on the ongoing efforts by law enforcement, government agencies, and support organizations to try and understand and combat this threat.
It's a complex problem, but there are people working hard to address it.
So it's really important for you, our listener, to be aware of these issues.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't have kids who are heavily online.
Right.
The fact that online interactions are so pervasive means that these trends can impact all of us.
Yeah, they can affect society as a whole.
So understanding how all of this works is a crucial first step towards creating safer online spaces for everyone.
I think that's a great way to put it.
And on that note, here's something for you to think about.
Okay.
Given how interconnected our online and offline lives have become,
Yeah.
what are some of the bigger societal factors that might be contributing to the rise of these harmful online communities?
That's a good question.
And maybe even more importantly, What can each of us do as individuals to help create safer and more positive online environments for everyone, especially young people?
That's something we all need to consider.
It really is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was great to be here.
See you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.